What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So now that you're probably on the ground after the highs of watching a lot of the boss fights and reveal stuff from Gotham Knights, I felt it was actually the best time for us to start talking about PC requirements for this game. There are a lot of things on my mind that I thought I'd drop, and so stay tuned. And for those of you who are playing on PC, you probably see this as something that is somewhat important, or maybe if you're sitting on one of these beautiful rigs, it doesn't bother you at all. Now, I am playing Gotham Knights, or my plan nonetheless is to play Gotham Knights on PC during the release time. So this is one of the reasons I feel like this conversation is really going to open up the door for things like performance, and possibly the developers will showcase something. So right now on the Steam page, there are no requirements that have been announced for the PC version of Gotham Knights. This is usually something that developers will just maybe put up there, or eventually they will use a showcase to show their PC requirements trailer or some performance thing like that. So I'm not going to be really too surprised if we saw something like that from the game, but it is still something that we have to pay close attention to. And the reason I say that is because just recently, the Marvel Spider-Man game, having been released on the PC, the remastered, really had some interesting requirements that I wanted to go ahead and share with you guys. So the minimum specs for playing that game was like an i3, and the GPU minimum in terms of the requirements was like a GTX 950. And this was quite peculiar to me. And then when I looked at the recommended settings, we're looking at a 1060. So they're asking for a 6 gigs graphics card at minimum, or at least an 8 gigs AMD graphics card. So this was quite interesting to me, but then the CPU requirements weren't necessarily crazy. I mean, you could look at something like an i5 4670 is what they're actually asking. But I thought that if you actually compared this to, say, a game like Arkham Knight on PC, which has no ray tracing capabilities and some of the other things that this Marvel Spider-Man Remastered has, but is still a good looking game on PC, you'll notice that the requirements were quite interesting. So the minimum requirements at the time Arkham Knight was released was something like having 6 gigs of RAM and using an i5 750s, very old CPU, or an i7 3770. It's like a very, very hardcore ancient, Intel, CPU, but nothing crazy. You could still run a lot of games on those i7s, but it's quite interesting that the creme de la creme, or the cream of the crop of that time, the game was asking for like 3 gigs of VRAM on your graphics card, compared to the Spider-Man game, which is asking for about 6 gigs of VRAM. It doesn't seem like a big difference, but it's interesting to see the change nonetheless, with superhero games getting more and more ambitious, and developers trying to meet this need of adding a lot to their games and making their games a lot more wider, and all of the above. And so what the interesting conversation here too is actually leaning on is it will probably also clue us into this entire conversation as to why the game was actually canceled for the PS4 version, in my mind anyways. Because one thing about the game, if in terms of these requirements that I'm talking about, is if you maybe look at the requirements of the game on how it will probably run on a PlayStation 5, it will probably run the same on every PS5 machine, because the PS5 machines largely are the same at the moment. And then the Xbox machines, there are only 2 different kinds, the Series X and S. So they'll run similar in the Series X line, and then for the Series S, they'll run based on the capabilities of that console itself. So for the console development, that's usually more streamlined in a sense, because you have one machine that you're just developing and adapting for. On the PC side, it's a little strange in a sense, because everyone's going to, experience their performance quite differently based on some hardware factors that they have. One person has got 8 gigs, the other person has got 64, another person got 128 gigs of RAM. These things can actually touch or at least talk about the way they will perform. You have to put those things in perspective. You actually have to consider those factors. And then just recently, there was an interview that was actually on Axios. And the head of Warner Games, this is David Haddad, he basically has said, or was basically highlighted in this interview, that one of the reasons they delayed Gotham Knights and one of the reasons they canceled its other versions was because of trying to get the teams to deliver the games at the best quality. And then this was also the reason they actually had this 9-week delay for Hogwarts Legacy as well. I believe strongly that Hogwarts Legacy was able to get this delay because of the luxury that they had to be able to eat a few more months to kind of get their optimization in place. Gotham Knights, on the other hand, probably did not have that luxury. So what we got is the fact that they looked and said, yo, the release window cannot necessarily be pushed back too much. We got to get this game out. And I think the concession that had to be made was that the past gen version had to be canceled. So once we start to see these requirements, it will really change the conversation, and we'll be able to get kind of a marker as to exactly where this game, is. And then another thing too that I feel the developers can probably do is to do a showcase that, that really does give a lot of information and details as to how this game is possibly going to run on, on a PC hardware. A game that really did a good job doing this was Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. The developers actually took the time to showcase a lot of the functionality and a lot of the different, options that you had when you were playing this game on PC, depending on the hardware and the hardware classes that you used. And to me, I thought this was such a good looking game. Now, I didn't beat the game. I didn't play more than like 6 hours. It was just not for me. I don't know why. I guess the game was just in a different format. And again, the way the combat was all set up and structured, believe you me, you guys already know my preference. It's all Arkham free flow, and I've had to even condition myself to want to go with the Gotham Knights combat so far. So Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy was just all the way back there. But I think this is something critical that the developers can actually show to serve the community, and I'm hoping that they actually start showing it sooner or later. This is going to actually provide the audience members, ways for, or the community anyways, options, and give information as to ways they might want to engage in the game. For those of you, like I may have said in the beginning of this video, who are sitting on one of those 30 series computers, you're sitting pretty. There's nothing wrong about that. I'm still on the 10 series. My best GPU right now is a 1080 Ti, and that's actually done on purpose. I've been waiting for the 30 series to actually come back to their senses, and it seems like they have. And so I want to see what the requirements are and see what I can get away with. If they have ray tracing capabilities and all that stuff, I might think about a 30 series, but if not, then I'm fine where I am. I really don't have any, pressure or it doesn't even matter whether they have ray tracing capabilities or not, but I'm under no obligation, but I still would like to at least experience the game in a significantly better quality, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. If you're playing on PC, what is your setup like? What are you trying to achieve when you get this game, and when you're playing it? Talk to me. Let's talk specs in the comment section, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Peace out.